Yes.
That says no antibiotic. Is that considered organic?
Not per se. If it's not labeled organic, it's not organic. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not better to take chicken that says, I'm sorry? Will they have arsenic in it?
Of antibiotic.
Right. If it just says free of antibiotics, it may very well have arsenic in it. Arsenic comes from the feed. The feed is contaminated with arsenic.
Say not to have the arsenic.
Not to have the arsenic, it's got to be organic. So at least the feed is organic. So the feed is not contaminated with arsenic. However, the best chicken, as well as the best beef, is going to be free-range, grass-fed. Chickens naturally don't eat grains that much. In fact, if anything at all, they really don't eat grains. Chickens eat grass, and they eat bugs. And sometimes their feed can be, given extra boost if there's not enough around during the winter, if they're given flax seeds, so they're higher in omega-3. The problem with animals fed grains is that they become very high in omega-6, which is pro-inflammatory. Their flesh becomes pro-inflammatory. And probably a lot of the negative things that you read about in people who eat a meat-laden diet might very well come from not only the pesticides and growth hormone and all that stuff, but also from the fact that they're very high in omega-6s. Omega-6 is a pro-inflammatory fatty acid. So you want more omega-3s in your animals. They have to be eating grass or they have to be eating flax. And then they become anti-inflammatory. And our ancestors, that was natural for our ancestors. Our ancestors were eating these animals who were running around. They're lean. And they were eating grass when they were available. So they had much more healthy meat. Most of the meat nowadays is not worth eating. You're much better off being a vegetarian to eat that kind of meat. Yeah, let me just repeat it so that people can hear it. The comment was that, there's so much going on that there's a real incentive for the farmer and for everybody, the inspectors, the farmer, the FDA, to bury all this information. They don't want anybody to know about it. And the truth is, we're being spoon-fed a lot of lies, And I don't, look, I'm the last person, you may have trouble believing this, but I'm the last person who's going to be an alarmist. I really don't tend to overreact to things. I really tend to look at all this, with some skepticism. But I've been immersed in this for years and years, looking at the actual data, not looking at the conclusions written by government scientists, but actually going back and looking at the data of the study. And the conclusions don't fit the data. The guy says there's no problems. I look at the data and the animals are dying. They're sterile, they're dying, they're having this, they're having that. It's really very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. But so what you should look for, so the bottom line is, look for organic or even wild-crafted. If you can get like wild blueberries that are grown out in the woods somewhere, that's the best. Because they've had to fight with nature in order to stay alive. They're not cultivated, they're not super sweet. If you've had wild strawberries or wild blueberries, they're usually not as sweet as the ones you buy. They're not cultivated. But they've created their own antioxidant system to fight nature, to actually protect themselves from too much sun, to protect themselves from drought, to protect themselves from insects. They have their own pesticide system. And those polyphenols are what make us healthy. So wild stuff is great. If you can eat meat, free range, like wild boar, grass-fed beef, buffalo, free-range chicken, wild salmon. Unfortunately, even salmon supposedly now has some mercury in it. So you have to be careful. I would now, I tend to eat a lot of salmon. When I test myself on Monday, I'm going to find out whether or not I've overdone that. And I'm probably going to start spreading out, the animal protein that I eat. Yes? Well, the first thing to do is to start to educate yourself and avoid exposure. That's the most important thing to do, even more important than chelation. And I do chelation, but I'm telling you, it's actually more important to avoid exposure. It's not the whole story, though, because unfortunately, some of these things are persistent. These persistent organic phosphates, they have that name persistent because they're persistent. They last in the soil and the environment. They're not broken down for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 100 years. They're going to be around forever, a lot longer than we are. If they're in your body, they're going to be there a long time, and just avoiding exposure is no longer enough. So in addition to avoiding exposure, you're really going to have to start thinking of detoxifying. And detoxifying, you know, short of chelation, because chelation is really important, although it's not germane with the organic phosphates. It really only chelates heavy metals. But the other ways is sweat, far infrared sauna, or just get out and exercise, you know, and really allow yourself to sweat and take a shower afterward. And there are other things too. Heavy breathing while you exercise also helps to detoxify your body. Colon hydrotherapy can also help. In our office, we have a wonderful colon hydrotherapy practice. They were here today, right adjacent to us in our booth, and they're just great people, and they do a terrific job. When I first heard about colon hydrotherapy, look, I'm a traditionally trained doc from Cornell. I thought, what is this crazy stuff, you know? I mean, it really sounded, first of all, it sounded gross, and second of all, it sounded weird, wacky. But the fact is, when I started seeing patients who've been through it, they get better. They felt less toxic, they had more energy. I said, something is going on here. You know, the attitude in very often with conventional physicians is, if I can't understand it, it must not be true. My attitude is, if I can't understand it, but it seems to work, let me try to figure out why it is, but I'm not going to ignore it in the meantime. You know, as long as it seems to be safe and it seems to help people, definitely do it. And I think there's some logic behind it. I think there is a logic in that it does detoxify. You know, colon is a major area of toxic dump from the liver. There's something called the enterohepatic circulation that constantly recycles toxins between your bloodstream and into your colon and back out again into your bloodstream. So this enterohepatic circulation is very important, and colon hydrotherapy tends to grab some of that stuff as it's circulating through the colon. Yes?
I have a quick comment. I read the book Suzanne Summers' Breakthrough, and I was going through the book, everything that you're saying, a lot of it's in there, and you were one of the 10 doctors that are in the book.
Yeah, what she said was that I'm one of the 10 doctors in New York that's in Suzanne Summers' book, Breakthroughs. It's a really interesting book, by the way. I would definitely, I just want to make sure, before I answer the next question, I want to make sure to acknowledge somebody. You know, I told you I was starting to write a book at one time about the 4 pillars of health, and now it's up to the 6 pillars of health. I mentioned that a talk that I gave a couple of years ago. I saw somebody at somebody's booth, somebody wrote the 7 pillars of health. I may have to write the 10 pillars of health just to up the ante and make sure that, you know, nobody's going to trump this. But anyway, we're in the process of writing a book, and I'm, you know, I have really very little time. But Alex is wonderful. As you know, he's got tremendous energy. He really wants to get this into a book. All the things that I've been saying at these meetings and getting these pillars out, and so people can actually read this. So Alex has really helped me. He connected me with a wonderful writer, Melissa Navi. I don't know if she's here. I see some of her family members. There's Melissa. She's just terrific. And we sit on every Tuesday, and I just shoot my mouth off, and she's writing things down, and she turns it into really beautiful writing. And I'm amazed, you know. So I just want to acknowledge how great a job that she's doing, and hopefully what it means is that, you know, maybe in some time in the not too distant future, maybe, you know, 10, 15 years from now, we'll have a book. And it may turn out to have more pillars. I don't know yet. All right, next question. Yes?